In the fall of 2023, a girl went to the park with her parents to ride her bike, but she never returned. Her relatives called the police, sparking an extensive search. Soon, they stumbled upon a shocking lead, which changed the course of the investigation. Eventually, detectives unraveled the truth, and it was truly unexpected. Charlotte Sena was born on September 4, 2014, in the small American town of Greenfield, New York. Growing up in a large and loving family, she was in the middle of 3 sisters. Charlotte was a lively and cheerful child. She enjoyed playing with friends, spending time with her sisters, and going on nature trips with her parents. Greenfield, with a population of just over 5,000 residents, was surrounded by forests, lakes, and picturesque parks, making it a perfect getaway for Charlotte's family. On September 30, 2023, when Charlotte was 9, her parents, along with some friends, decided to visit a national park about 11 miles from their home. Charlotte looked forward to this trip, planning to go with her friends and bringing along their bikes for a ride through the park. Upon arrival, the parents set up a camp, and soon the kids set off on their bikes. The park had specially designed circular tracks, one of which was conveniently located near their camp, so Charlotte and her friends chose that track for their ride. They set out around 6:15 in the evening, aiming to return to the camp before nightfall. After a few laps, Charlotte's friends wanted to head back, but she decided to do one more round. Her friends rode back towards the camp, and Charlotte went in the opposite direction on her bike. Sometime later, her parents started worrying, as Charlotte should have been back by now. A single lap on that track took no more than 10 minutes, even if you were riding slowly. However, Charlotte still hadn't returned, and the adults went searching for her. They walked along the circular track, and around 6:45, they made a distressing discovery. Charlotte's bicycle was abandoned next to the trail, but the girl was nowhere to be found. The parents immediately feared the worst scenario, that someone had abducted their daughter. There were no logical reasons for the girl to leave her bike in the middle of the path and walk away. For a brief moment, they considered that there were some issues with the bicycle, but it became evident that it wasn't the case. The wheels were intact and the chain was in working condition. Fearing the worst, her parents decided to call the police. Officers arrived on the scene approximately 15 minutes later and immediately began searching for Charlotte. The sight of her abandoned bicycle led them to a disheartening conclusion: she was most likely abducted. Still, they couldn't dismiss the possibility that she might be lost in the woods, so they initiated a search. The police scoured the entire park and closed it to visitors. They checked everyone's vehicles and camps before letting them go. Some people wanted to stay and help with the search, but without proper organization, it only complicated the police's job. They combed through every inch of the forest. Initially, officers focused on the area along the circular trail Charlotte had been riding, but found no leads. They then expanded the search to cover the entire park. However, it proved to be quite challenging. The park spanned about 15 square kilometers. The police sought assistance from park rangers, the fire department, and state police to cover the extensive area. The FBI also joined the investigation, focusing on efforts to identify a potential abductor. They tried to obtain CCTV footage from every surveillance camera near the park and along the nearby roads. They believed that if Charlotte had indeed been kidnapped, the perpetrator must have driven her away by car. FBI agents also requested information from the Park Service about all visitors. Since everyone had to register and pay to enter the park, their personal information was stored in the database. However, examining it took time due to the considerable foot traffic in the park that day. They also obtained data from cellular providers regarding the location of all phones present in the park when Charlotte went missing. Considering the possibility that the abductor might have entered the park without registering, the FBI agents aimed to match visitors' data from the Park Service with the cell phone locations, potentially identifying a suspect. Yet, gathering all this data was a time-consuming task. It also involved approximate phone location tracking via cell towers, not precise GPS tracking. The search continued until the late night without yielding any results. Early the next morning, officers returned to the park, and the search team grew larger. In total, over 400 people participated in the search for the missing girl. Police also reached out to the public through the media, urging people to share any information related to Charlotte's disappearance. The case quickly gained widespread attention, with the state governor addressing the issue at a dedicated press conference and showing support for the family. That same morning, the police activated the Amber Alert system, allowing them to quickly notify residents about the child's disappearance. They hadn't used it on the first day to ensure Charlotte wasn't simply lost in the park. Now, it was almost certain she had fallen victim to abduction, as she should have been found by now if that wasn't the case. Unfortunately, the searches once again yielded no results, and the FBI's attempts to identify the abductor were unsuccessful. By the evening, the police began to realize that finding Charlotte alive was becoming more and more unlikely. The crucial first few hours after a child's abduction are vital, and within that time frame, there's a high chance of locating them alive. However, as the search for Charlotte surpassed this critical window, the statistical likelihood of a positive outcome significantly diminished. Yet, both the police and Charlotte's parents weren't ready to give up. Early on the third day, they returned to the park to continue their efforts. Meanwhile, around 4:20 in the morning, a man approached the Charlotte family's house in a car. He walked up to the mailbox, dropped in a letter, and quickly drove off. A police officer was observing the house from a distance, but didn't approach the man, thinking he might be a family acquaintance expressing support for Charlotte's parents. Throughout those days, various people had visited the house, leaving letters and food. But, despite the officer's initial hesitation, he found the man suspicious and decided to check the mailbox. Inside was a note that instantly changed the course of the investigation. There was a letter written by the kidnapper stating that he had been holding Charlotte and was willing to let her go in exchange for $50,000. The note was immediately sent to the lab where experts urgently began their analysis. Soon, they uncovered several fingerprints and ran it through the databases, but there were no matches. Around 2:30 p.m., they made the second attempt, and there was a breakthrough. The fingerprint matched a 47-year-old man named Craig Nelson Ross Jr. He had been in the New York State database since 1999 following his arrest for DUI. Ross lived just a few miles from the Charlotte family's house, and the police quickly headed there. However, they encountered a problem. The house at the address had recently been seized due to the man's failure to pay property taxes for years. Researching information on Ross, the police quickly learned that he had been residing in a trailer on his mother's property. The woman's house was located 14 miles away from Greenfield. The police swiftly obtained a warrant and sent over 30 officers to the scene with a helicopter covering them from the air. They surrounded the trailer, stormed in using flash grenades, and arrested Ross. The man attempted to resist, but he was quickly apprehended. At first, there was no sign of the girl, leading officers to believe she might not have been there. They thoroughly searched the entire trailer and looked into a locked closet. Under a pile of rags, they found Charlotte. She was alive and immediately rushed towards her rescuers. She was promptly taken to the hospital for examination where doctors confirmed there was no threat to her life. Family members were immediately brought to the hospital where they reunited with Charlotte, and soon she was taken home. Her parents, along with hundreds of people participating in the search, were overjoyed. It is worth mentioning that just 10 minutes before her release, Charlotte's mom shared a strange premonition. At that moment, she was in the park where active searches were ongoing. She expressed a strong feeling that hinted her daughter would come home that day, and 10 minutes later, the police informed her of Charlotte's rescue. Meanwhile, detectives arrested Ross without bail and took him in for questioning. Given the fact that this case is still ongoing, the police haven't disclosed any details of the interrogation. However, it appears he did not admit guilt, so the case will be forwarded to the court. But some information about the suspect and his motives is already known. Ross' ex-girlfriend told journalists that in 2017, she obtained a restraining order against him. At that time, she lived with him, his 12-year-old son, and 4-year-old daughter in his mother's house. During an argument, he attacked her and attempted to strangle her, leading her to report the incident to the police. According to the woman, Ross may have been planning the abduction for months. She revealed that throughout his life, he never wanted to work, always seeking ways to live off others, mostly on his mother, playing on her empathy by claiming to suffer from a serious illness, and she agreed to support him. Ross' ex-girlfriend believes he initially targeted Charlotte's family for a specific reason. Despite the girl's parents being of ordinary middle class, her late grandfather had substantial wealth. In 1998, he slipped and suffered a severe injury, subsequently suing the city and receiving over $2 million in compensation. Even after more than 20 years, many Greenfield residents still remembered this story. The ex-girlfriend stated that Ross was aware of this payout and likely decided to profit from the kidnapping. Considering that Charlotte was abducted from the park when left unattended for just a few minutes, Ross must have been watching her. According to his ex-girlfriend, he could have been observing the family for a long time, studying their routine and waiting for the right moment. There was another fact indicating that the crime was premeditated. According to his ex-girlfriend, several months before the incident, he covered his trailer with a tarp, something that he had never done before. Considering that he kept Charlotte there, this could indicate careful preparation. Ross's neighbors also shared troubling observations. One woman recounted a past incident where Ross tried to take her 10-year-old son somewhere, and she had to intervene. Another neighbor stated that his family had always been problematic, and Ross, from an early age, regularly went to neighbors asking for food. Later, the police uncovered additional details about Ross's criminal history. A year before the attack on his girlfriend, he was arrested for stalking but did not face serious consequences. Just a month before Charlotte's abduction, he was suspected of sexually assaulting his underage relative, but the case was closed for some reason. Reporters also spoke with his son, who was an adult by that time. He expressed hatred for his father, wishing for him to die in prison, but did not share any specific details. About a month after Ross's arrest, the police made a disheartening announcement. In addition to kidnapping, he faced charges of sexually assaulting Charlotte. Apparently, during the time Ross held the girl in his trailer, he managed to commit some horrible deeds, but the police have not disclosed any details yet. It is known only that Ross refused to admit guilt regarding the sexual assault charges and plans to defend himself in court. Considering the fact that the abducted girl was found in his trailer, he probably has no chances of avoiding jail. Besides the fingerprint on the ransom note, investigators also found indirect evidence confirming his involvement. Analyzing the location data of all phones in the park at the time of the abduction, they discovered that Ross' smartphone was one of them. So, there are practically no doubts that the man will go to prison. However, as preparations for the trial are underway, detectives are also exploring Ross' potential connection to two other unsolved cases. In August 2003, 18-year-old Jennifer Hammond was selling magazines in the town of Milton. After her shift, she was supposed to meet with colleagues but never appeared at the designated spot. 6 years later, her remains were found near a lake 11 miles from town. It's worth mentioning that she disappeared just a few hundred yards from the house where Ross was living at the time. 2 years later, 19-year-old Christina White left a trailer park a mile away from Milton and disappeared. A year later, her remains were found, but the case remained unsolved. As for Ross, he was living in the same trailer park at the time. Now, the police are considering his possible involvement in these murders, but currently they lack any evidence, or they are withholding it in the interest of the investigation. Regarding the trial for Charlotte's case, it is set to begin in April 2024. Despite the presence of undeniable evidence of his guilt, it cannot be ruled out that Ross may be offered a plea deal. In case he continues to deny guilt, Charlotte will likely have to testify in court, recounting in detail what he did to her. To spare her such a traumatic experience, a plea deal might be an option. Now, all we can do is wait for the trial and hope that justice will prevail. Alright guys, share your thoughts on the story in the comments section, and don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Thank you for watching.